Imagine a single cell that never dies, a tiny biological time capsule capable of reproducing indefinitely. In 1951, doctors from Johns Hopkins University harvested such a cell from a 31-year-old African American woman named Henrietta Lacks. What seemed like an ordinary biopsy became one of the greatest tools in scientific history and one of the greatest inventions or discoveries of humanity. Today, I'm going to inform you about the Henrietta Lacks cells and the HeLa cell line. Understanding HeLa cells matters because they became the first immortal human cell to be able to be replicated within a laboratory indefinitely. This paved the way for many breakthroughs such as cancer research, vaccine research, and much more. First, I'll explain how the HeLa cells came to be and what makes them so special, so scientifically unique, and so amazing. Then we will go over the major scientific contributions that the HeLa cells provided, and we'll also talk about some of the ethical implications of this cell. To begin, let's look at how this extraordinary cell originated. In 1951, Henrietta Lacks had been overcome with an aggressive cervical cancer. She went to Johns Hopkins Hospital because it was one of the only hospitals at the time that was able to treat African American patients. Her treatment consisted of doctors taking a small tissue sample without her consent and without her knowledge. Her cells divided repeatedly. According to the Association for Women in Science, this sample gave rise to the HeLa cell line, named after the first two letters of Henrietta Lacks' first and last name. It became the first human cell line to be able to be indefinitely replicated within a laboratory environment, something that had never been achieved before. What made them unique was their immortality. Usually human cells die after so many replications. HeLa cells could divide indefinitely, and this made them incredibly useful for experiments because they could be transferred from one place to another, or they could be reused over and over. However, their strength also caused problems. Within the laboratory, the HeLa cells were so robust and powerful that they often took over other cell cultures, which messed up other experiments for scientists. Oftentimes, the scientists thought that they were doing an experiment with a certain type of cell, but it was actually the HeLa cell. This does not outweigh the pros that the cell brought. Even though the cell could have caused some problems in the laboratory, it was still instrumental in the development of many discoveries. Now we know how the cells began, let's talk about some of the scientific special things about the cell. Let's see how they transformed medical research. HeLa cells have been at the center of countless discoveries throughout history. According to the National Institute of Health, they were instrumental in the polio vaccine. They were also used in research for cancer, AIDS, HPV, gene mutations, and even they have gone to space. Over 110,000 research papers have mentioned the HeLa cell, which goes to show how easily they're able to be shared and how they are standardized in the scientific community. They make it really good for experiments and are reliable and reproducible across labs worldwide. But beyond science, there's a deeper ethical issue that has to do with fairness. In the 1950s, doctors did not need permission to harvest cells from a patient. They could do so without their consent or knowledge. Her story raised awareness about patient rights and informed consent. The Lacks family did not learn about the impermissible taking of her cells until decades later. Today, researchers emphasize consent, privacy, and fairness, lessons that we learned from Henrietta Lacks. So far, we discussed how HeLa cells began, how they transformed medicine and science, and how they also changed medical ethics. That tiny biopsy in the 1950s became an everlasting link between life and science. Her legacy lives on in every discovery that we find through her cells. Her cells remind us that behind every discovery there is a human story